Hello, everybody. I'm here with a review of Lost in Translation by Sofia Coppola, the 2003 movie. Now, I remember when this came out, it got a lot of buzz, just because it was shot in kind of a different way than a lot of movies. It kind of bridged the gap between like experimental film and art film and kind of a more mainstream romantic drama. It's also just kind of the setting was interesting. The themes it explored were interesting. It got a lot of buzz, and I remember my parents, if not necessarily being impressed by it, but finding it very interesting and it kind of sticking with them for a while. The movie leans very heavily into atmosphere. Like I said, it's kind of a mixture of an art film and a more mainstreamy film, and I guess also kind of a travelogue. And it tells the story a lot through atmosphere and inference. However, it contains a lot more dialogue than I find a lot of actual art movies would. And I was actually kind of surprised watching this because I liked it more than I figured I would. At its core, though, and I think this is the strength of the film and why I enjoyed it, is it explores, perhaps better than most things that I've seen, alienation. I think it portrays a sense of alienation better than just about any other film I've seen. Also, culture shock and the slow demystification of the other. So we'll get to a bigger plot summary later, but basically we have two Americans who happen to be in Tokyo, uh, a fading movie star played by Bill Murray, and a young woman in an aimless marriage played by Scarlett Johansson. So they meet up in a Tokyo hotel and they strike up an unlikely friendship, born from their shared isolation in a completely alien culture and their insomnia that's developed as a result of jet lag. So we just kind of have them hanging out together, having conversations, going out into Tokyo, and ultimately parting ways with nothing really being resolved between them, which I guess just kind of goes through the whole theme. So, looking at this movie on the media taste scale, I think this is very clearly within the immersive category. Like, I have it pretty much dead center in the immersive category. So it is a slow, mood driven character piece that relies very heavily on atmosphere, small gestures, and unspoken emotion. It's not all the way down because it's not like a complete minimalist art movie or anything like that, but definitely the camera work, the music, and just kind of the implication does a lot of it for you. It's the kind of film that wants you to feel your way through it rather than think your way through it. And whether that works depends entirely on how much you enjoy kind of lingering in someone else's quiet melancholy. I generally, it's kind of a toss up for me. I think it worked in this case, but it may not work in others. So it is reflective because it has slow pacing with long, quiet scenes that really encourage you to sit with the character's emotions. There's no real plot twists or much of a plot structure in general. There's not really any major twists. There's no real stakes. All the tension, if there is any, is just kind of emotional. And it kind of just goes into people's feelings, and it doesn't really kind of explain it in depth. From a sensory perspective, location, taking advantage of the fact that it's filmed in Tokyo, in a lot of cases, trying to find like the most aggressively weird Japanese stuff they can and shove it in, is super important. They don't really state the themes that much. They do a good job of kind of showing it. Something I like in general is I like whenever something is kind of surreal and dreamlike. And I think this film does a good job of that. So it's firmly in the immersive category. It's not normally the kind of movie I like, but I enjoyed this more than I figured I would. Okay, so let's go through kind of a summary of the story. So we have the two strangers abroad, Bob Harris, played by Bill Murray, who is an aging actor who has gone to Japan to film a commercial for a type of whiskey there. And they're paying him $2 million to do that. And especially back in 2003, that's a lot of cash. And you have Charlotte, played by Scarlett Johansson, who is a young woman who's tagging along on her husband's work trip. And they're both just kind of adrift in the foreign city. So very early on, you have just a profound sense of cultural dislocation from both of them. Bill Murray, in particular, when because there's quite a bit of the movie where he's trying to film the commercial on set or dealing with the agents from the whiskey company, and it's just you get the sense of just it caused me a lot of anxiety watching it because it reminds me so much of a lot of my daily life. Basically, none of the people around him speak English. And the people who speak Japanese just speak at him as if he speaks fluent Japanese. And there's no subtitles in this movie, at least for the vast majority of it. So you'll just have scenes where Bill Murray's just sitting there and the director will just be speaking really aggressively or like really passionately in Japanese for a minute or two. And then the translator in like broken English will just give like two words or something like, he liked your performance. And it's very clear that that's not what the guy was saying. And you'll frequently have like, they'll be talking in Japanese and they're clearly talking about him and he can't really react to it or respond to it. And so he'll be on set all day around basically no one who speaks English, at least more than a couple of words, and being poked and prodded and trying to figure out what the director even wants. Yeah, I found it a very kind of anxious and it kind of made me uncomfortable watching it. Because once again, just a lot of my day-to-day life has become like that as time goes on. With Scarlett Johansson's character, she goes out and tries to like find herself, I guess. She goes to like a temple. She tries to go see some of the sights. But it's just for whatever reason so alien and so strange to her, she can't connect to it. And they both just spend a lot of time moping around the hotel bar drinking. So they managed to start up a friendship and they managed to kind of spark a bit of life in each other. And they start kind of like going out and partying and they meet up with some of Charlotte's friends. And, you know, like all the cliches, going to the mall and getting the pictures. They go to like a strip club for some reason. They go get whatever the one of those Japanese things like where you cook the meat at the table. They just go through a whole bunch of different stuff. And you kind of see both of them come out of their shell. And it's clear as you go through the movie, it's not just the fact that they're in Tokyo, that they feel this sense of alienation, that it's something pre-existing, that Charlotte really has nothing in common with her husband, and they live completely separate lives, and he more or less just kind of repeatedly abandons her for his job, and that it's kind of affectionless. And Bob is in a similar situation where his wife just seems to nag him constantly and henpeck him, and their marriage seems like it's really depressing. And in kind of a weird scene, he has sex with like an entertainer later. It was kind of really odd. But no, they have this deep sense of alienation. Both of them feel hopeless. Both of them feel, once again, even before they went to Japan, that their lives have no actual meaning. And they're trying to kind of struggle with that. So we kind of, like I said, we have this ambiguous thing going back and forth, talking to each other a bit about each other's lives, filling the emotional void. It doesn't exactly go into a full-blown romance. It's kind of portrayed as like I don't know, My Week with Marilyn, or like one of those things where you have this brief whirlwind romance that just kind of peters out and goes away. And there's an understanding they'll never see each other again. And there's always going to be that question of, were they the one who got away? Were they the person that they were intended to be with, despite the age barrier? And so they both changed a bit from it, but they also both just part on very kind of ambiguous and subtle ways, which once again, I feel it's very melancholic. They found a brief bit of comfort in each other and they managed to connect with another person, but they've kind of gone back to their state of social isolation. And even once they get back to America around people who speak the same language as them, they're going to feel profoundly alone. So that's kind of a brief overview of the movie. So let's talk about some of the literary or character themes. So this is certainly, like I said, about culture shock. It's like it's about a sense of alienation. So in just a pure like foreign alienation sense, because there's two different types of it. It is being in a society that's completely different. No one speaks your language. All the customs are really weird. There's like all these just different institutions, these different types of restaurants and bars and locations and stuff that just doesn't really resemble anything they understand, and so they exist in these self-contained bubbles. They're just these random Americans. There's plenty of scenes of them just kind of walking through the streets, them being the only like white people, and just sticking out like a sore thumb. And once again, this is something I think a lot of people feel, and it's just Japan happens to be the setting from this for this, but a lot of people in the West, particularly in countries like Canada or the U.S., do feel this. They feel just walking through any city with how much things have changed, particularly in the last 30 years, this profound sense of alienation, this profound sense of isolation, that they don't have anything in common with the people who are around them. And there's just no sense of trust. There's no sense of shared identity or shared life experience. And once again, it's not just in the case of Japan. It's also very clear that's what they feel in their home life, and they're kind of just going from one alienated state to another. This was kind of another interesting point I thought of. There's the inability to adapt to the alien culture, and part of that is because they see it in a very I think you can make an argument they see it in a very like liberal, I don't know if liberal globalist or upper middle class American swipple or whatever you want to call it, but they see it in the very like, I don't know anything about foreign cultures, but I feel good about them type of way. Where like it's maybe I'm reading too much into this and you can disagree with me. It just this reminds me of a lot of people, because like I know at the work a lot of the people who are way more liberal than me and way more committed to multiculturalism, and whenever there's like some event or potluck or whatever for a different culture, they will go to it and they'll talk about how much they like it. But at a fundamental level, they don't really know anything about any of these people or about their cultures or their religions. And if I mention even like really minor historical or geographical facts, they're completely baffled and they think I'm some sort of super intellectual. Not that I'm not, but just for knowing things like the capital of the city. And my friend Terrellian from Ottawa has said this quite a bit, wherein he finds that liberals think it's rude, and he can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, if you ask somebody where they're from and if you ask them where in the place they're from, where they're from. Like if they say they're from India, you're like, well, are you from like Kerala? Are you from Bengal? Are you from Madrasa? Are you from Sikkim? And you kind of ask those sorts of questions. And by and large, the people are actually very impressed or appreciated that someone's actually interested in their home country. Whereas I find a lot of the time with liberals, they don't know anything about it. They just know that it's like superior and it's a good thing. And they kind of feel that asking that question is a way of othering the person, is a way of separating them and making them different. And yet I feel in a lot of cases, despite the fact that you are doing that, it is something that people appreciate because they're able to talk more about their actual identity. And so I think a lot of cases, the impression Westerners have of different cultures is this very curated, this very sanitized, this idea that like, you see this with how they like Islam is viewed. Like, it's not as much anymore, but they say like Islam is the feminist religion. Like Islam treats women much better. Only like Western white people are racist. They're the only ones who had slavery. And they don't really take any of these cultures seriously or try to understand them on their own terms. It's just a very superficial kind of impression of it. I think there's also, and this is something I find in just a lot of these kind of postmodern movies, there's a lack of a meaning in a post-religious society. It's very clear that a lot of these people, when they talk about like purpose or meaning, or like Charlotte says, I have a philosophy degree or something like that, that the obvious hole they're trying to fill is the transcendent, the belief in something that's fundamentally bigger than themselves. And they're trying to fill this, these two not so much, but with people try to fill this with hedonism, with secular messianic ideas that one day will be this big multicultural one world and there'll be no war and we will be able to achieve salvation and create heaven on earth. And it's just very clear that that is the missing characteristic. This belief in something transcendent, the belief in a God, the belief in an afterlife, the belief in something beyond the here and now. And so it just kind of leads to a lifestyle where you're just kind of drifting from one distraction to the next, trying to avoid your inevitable death. There's nothing to aim for. There's nothing to aspire to really, other than a kind of material comfort. It may be like brief splashes of interactions with other people. I also think it's interesting that they're both married, and Bill Murray's character even has children. So you have this kind of vestigial civilization, social structure there. You have things left over from when society was more structured, when it was more religious. And the people get married, and it doesn't really mean what it used to mean anymore. And it's not really the goal or the point. It doesn't have the transcendent meaning that it used to, but it still just kind of limps along and continues to exist because there's nothing really left. There's nothing really to replace it, and it's just kind of civilizational inertia. Another thing, and I talked a little bit about this, is the disappointing demystification of the other. So at first, Tokyo feels mysterious and charged with possibility. The longer that they're there, though, the more the novelty wears off, and the otherness, like this mystical, magical place, is reduced to karaoke bars, neon streets, just kind of restaurants, malls, consumerism, a lot of stuff. And they come to realize it's not really that different. The otherness is just what they're used to, but with some different packaging and kind of a different coat of paint. And they kind of realize, and I find this a lot of the time when people have like maybe this view of India as this land of spiritual enlightenment, and then they go there and then they find how kind of filthy it is, and the poverty and a lot of the other stuff, and then they see that firsthand, and then they just kind of go, oh, well, that's what it's actually like. And the same is true wherein people might go to a very conservative society, but also is poor and has all kinds of screwed up problems of its own, and see that and go, oh, okay, well, maybe my perception of that isn't really true. And that's always a very disappointing and difficult circumstance, especially when you've built your life around this kind of fetishization of the other. So, political and philosophical and religious themes beyond what I already talked about. Once again, it reminds me very much of my daily experience in Canada. Now, I've talked about this, but very often in meetings, there'll be like 6 or 7 people, and me and maybe one other person will be able to speak fluent English. And so it'll just kind of be like an hour of people from different backgrounds. So they're not even united in their otherness. They're like Filipino or Indian or Chinese or whatever. So it's not like the language that they're native to is the same. And they'll just be poorly communicating with each other for like an hour. It'll go nowhere. It will resolve nothing. And then people will go back to whatever it was they're doing. Just going into restaurants where there's no English speakers, not being able to like go up to reception at anything. In a lot of cases, not even really being able to call anything or use any kind of phone services because once again, you just can't get service in English. And you just look around and the people around you don't have your religious. It's not just that they don't have your blood, they don't have your religious tradition. They don't have your culture. They don't really have any of it, and they probably aren't ever going to assimilate, especially given the proportion. Because I know something that saddens me, because I like to make like pop culture references and stuff, is just dealing with all these like new people have shown up. They have none of the same cultural experience that I did growing up here, or even if they had been in the US or Britain or even Western Europe. Like, they don't get any of my movie references. They don't like know anything that happened pretty much in the West before they showed up like a couple months ago or a couple years ago. Just any of that shared understanding of like media events, cultural phenomenons, music, movies, TV shows, even just very basic expressions, I find is just something you can't even use anymore, and you have to just basically abandon a lot of that, and in kind of any better, in a lot of cases, just kind of vocabulary and slang and things, and just use this very basic received pronunciation, globalized English. The interesting thing about Japan is that it is totally alien, but it's still a developed country. And you can argue maybe that makes it less strange or more strange, because it could be an uncanny valley thing where the fact that it's not completely alien, like if you went to Somalia or Haiti or something, makes it more weird. Or it could make it less weird. But once again, the choice of Japan doesn't matter. It's not any specifically about Japan. I find the thing, though, that is interesting, and this is something I notice in a lot of movies like this, is this theme of social alienation. Is this theme that people in modern Western society don't have any sense of community, they don't have any purpose, they don't have any sense of self. And this is just something you see from pretty much everyone. And this isn't just like a right-wing thing or a reactionary thing. Plenty and plenty of like left-wing leaning movies and music and stuff cover this. But yet a lot of these people see the solution to that as importing more of the other, of making it like even worse, in the hopes that somehow if we go from like 90% of people sharing a language, culture, religion, background to little groups of 5 here, 2% here, 10% there, that will somehow create a society where people don't feel alienated. And in particular in this movie, they went to like this other culture. They felt completely like depressed and hopeless in it. And so the solution that globalism tells us is we have to import that culture that made us feel so uncomfortable and so alien. And we have to mix it with ours and have this weird chimera of both of them, that somehow like multiculturalism and importing all these different foreign cultures will lead to a cure for alienation or something like that. That's just something I find interesting whenever you're dealing with kind of these fish out of water things. It's the idea somehow that is the answer. So, scoring the movie as a whole, this is the scale I use. 5 is a mixed bag. For me, 5 is like a passable movie. I try to gravitate a bit more towards that and not make everything a 7 versus 8. So I give this movie a 6.5. 6.5 being okay. I enjoyed it. It's not exactly my thing, but I did appreciate it. So I enjoyed this movie a lot more than, so just to look at kind of the things I enjoyed, I liked it more than I normally do. It does have the strong dreamlike quality. I didn't find it particularly boring. I found it kind of hypnotic and mellow enough that I could kind of nod along with it. And it just kind of went by pretty quick. It is one of the better depictions of alienation, loneliness, and an inability to relate to the outside world that I think I've seen. And you had an excellent performance from both Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson. Some issues I had with it, with a lot of the monologues went on pretty long and were often very self-indulgent. This is a very self-indulgent, like postmodern semi-art film, and that really shows. There's like weird excessive nudity in it, like when they go to the strip club for no reason. And I'm just like, is that really necessary? And it opens with like a, I don't know if it's like a 2 or 3 minute long shot of Scarlett Johansson's ass. And I'm just like, is this really necessary? Like, I'm not really that prudish. But it's especially like in the movie where it's not like, doesn't have that much of that to begin with. I kind of don't like when it's just kind of inserted. Like if the whole thing is like hardcore and there's lots of stuff going on throughout, something like The Sopranos, like adding an extra scene or whatever, I still probably wouldn't like, but it's not as big a stretch. But they just put it in here and I thought it was kind of weird. There's a lot of there's a lot of similar content to this, movies about alienation. There's no solution presented, either in intellectual or practical sense. It's just basically we're screwed. There's no return to God. There's no anything. It's just this is the state of man. It's like a lamer version of existentialism. And just in general, I find whenever there's minimalism, people tend to just give it a higher review because they think it's profound. It's kind of like an emperor has no clothes thing where they think if they can't see the point of it, if they can't see the meaning in something, then that means that they're actually stupid when it's not that case. So I try to do an objective evaluation. So this is me trying to kind of adjust for my personal tastes. Subjectively, I'd probably give it an 8. It was very critically acclaimed. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but it did have very good cinematography. I'm not the biggest cinematography guy, but it was good. The lighting was good. The atmosphere was very well captured. Music was very well done. The acting, like I said, was great from both leads. And it was kind of an unusual romance story that was kind of a lot more mature and more took the audience more seriously than I feel like a lot of similar things would. Just kind of objective issues that I think a lot of people might find. The setting is not utilized. The fact that it's Japan is irrelevant. It could be basically anywhere in the world. It's just a foreign culture. You can think that that's okay or that's bad, but that's, I think, a fair criticism. There's no narrative stakes, and it makes the engagement in it difficult because it doesn't really go anywhere. It's just the tale of a week in Tokyo without any real definitive resolution. And like I said, there is avoid any kind of actual cultural engagement with Japan. And the pacing and lack of plot progression, people who like things to move a bit faster, I think might kind of have issues with it. So that's my review of Lost of Translation. I hope you enjoyed it. This is my new format I've been working on for doing reactionary reviews. So if you like this format or you want me to use something like this going forward, or if you want me to go back where I just kind of ramble on for a long period of time, or you like this but want it a bit different, just leave me some feedback below. Like I said, I've been trying to kind of improve on the content lately and try to kind of make stuff I feel better about putting up. So feedback is helpful. I don't always do what you guys say. I will read it though, and I will consider it. Just because I don't immediately adopt something or do something doesn't mean I didn't look at it and I didn't take it seriously. So I hope you enjoyed the review. I hope you enjoyed the new format. God bless, and I'll talk to you guys real soon.